Guys, today we're gonna just do a bit of a rundown on the history of the car since I bought it. Just to give you an idea of just how much we've actually done and then changed or had to change for a certain reason, that sort of stuff. So we bought the car on the 12th of March in 2013 off a guy from Tenterfield in New South Wales. He had the car for 10 years and he bought it off the original owner who had it for 11 years on a farm. So the guy I bought it from, he basically had it for sort of weekend four-wheel drive trips with his mates. So it had a 4-inch suspension lift, 35s, front locker, sort of homemade bar work like rear bar, front bar and sliders, and apart from that it was pretty much standard. It had a Safari turbo kit on it, only running about 12 psi. That was how I bought the car. The paintwork was alright, but it had been used for what it was, so had a few little marks here and there, but otherwise like inside was really clean. And a friend of mine knew the guy, so he knew it had a really good service history. Okay, so once I got the car, being sort of having a background in performance cars like V8s and that sort of thing, and talking to a lot of my mates that had these, the first thing we actually did to it was a bigger fuel pump. We went and got a 12mm injector pump put on it. Bigger injectors, had it tuned with the Safari turbo kit, all that stuff that was on it. Had it tuned on 17 psi and it made 174 rear wheel horsepower, and that was on the 35s with 4.1 diff gears, all that sort of stuff, and just how it sat pretty much. After then we were wanting to start camping in it, so I bought some roller roof rack bars. We did the drop down table here, just made it at home in the shed. I bought a second hand pair of Ironman drawers, made a homemade cargo barrier, and that was pretty much it. A few little things here and there, but that was our setup. We started camping with that, just using a big like esky that we had. We didn't have a second battery in the car or any of that stuff. The first sort of camping gear that we bought for the car was a cheap sort of package off eBay. It was a G-Camp brand, and it was the rooftop tent, an awning, a side tent like a copy of a Oz tent 32nd tent, and the annex drop room. And we had no idea what we were doing with that. The first, I think, 2 trips that we took it out on, just weekend trips, we couldn't even work out how to pin the windows out with the flexible poles. I never read instructions for anything, so that was probably our first mistake there. But we actually had to go on YouTube and look for a video on how to pop out the windows, which shows how little idea we really had. But yeah, we just used the car like that for a fair while. Got more and more into camping. As we went, we started getting all the little stuff together. We put some LED lights on the 4 corners of the roof rack bars, LED light strip in the awning, that sort of thing, just to make the car more usable. Around that time too, when we were just starting to get into camping, I was getting pretty involved, pretty into sort of the harder four-wheel driving, like tougher tracks and that sort of thing. And so the car copped a fair bit of abuse then, as you can see in some of these photos that we'll put up. And yeah, just first four-wheel drive I'd owned, you know, everyone makes mistakes when they get them and does some stupid things, but it was all in good fun and you learn a lot from it. Okay, so as you can see in some of these photos, we drowned the car a few times, and you learn to hate mud when you start four-wheel driving, because, long story short, the radiator was blocked from previous four-wheel driving. We were heading out to near Tabulum, New South Wales, going up the Malangani range. And about a quarter of the way up the range, or a bit more than that, I looked down to check on the engine temp, and the needle was right off on cold, so the sensor had popped off on our way out there. So I backed off, crept it up to the top of the range. I think it was about 40 degrees that day, middle of summer, and right at the top of the range, yeah, she went bang, coolant all out the bonnet. It was fairly depressing to have that happen. That ended up in the engine overheating, cracking the block, and just destroying the whole thing. That was a bit of a setback, but the car kept running. We got out there, camped that weekend, came back, and a friend of mine who rebuilt the whole motor, he helped us out a lot with it all. But before that happened, we were already planning, like, I wanted more power out of the car, because as most of you guys probably know, the more you start putting all this stuff in, the heavier the car gets, and I don't really like it getting slower and slower. I want it to go just as good, if not better. So at that time, we got a replacement block and a full rebuild done, and we actually changed the setup to a bigger turbo intake, but much of the same. Like, we still use the old small Safari intercooler standard intake. It was still the exhaust that I got on the car when I bought it, which was a 3-inch exhaust, but all the bends were just kinked over and it was fairly rusted out and wasn't really in good condition. So after the rebuild and the bigger turbo setup, we did get it tuned. It was tuned on 20 PSI and made 200 horsepower at the wheels. And again, that was with everything else standard and the 4-1 diff gears, all that sort of thing. And the clutch was slipping quite badly. Basically, after we got that done, we just started camping a lot more, trying to get out on more and more weekends. And that's when we sort of changed what we wanted from the car, and that was still to have a really capable car. I didn't want to like lower it down, put small tyres and stuff on it, so still a really capable car, but also capable of comfortable camping and touring. And also around the same time was when I sort of wanted it, I guess, to look a bit nicer than all the dings and scrapes and stuff that the car had in it. So we started modifying it more for touring, because it was already really capable off-road. Like, I've never really struggled. We put an Emu wing in this side. I made up a box to go on top of the rear drawers, which would hold the second battery that we bought, as well as a few more like camp lighting, that sort of thing. We started modifying. That was around the same time we got the MSA drop slide and bought a Angle 60-litre fridge, which was a big thing for us. While all that was while we were getting all those bits together, I actually had the car in at the panel shop had a few small sort of hail dings just from being parked at work one night, as well as a few dents in the rear quarters from four-wheel driving and all that sort of stuff. So we had them straightened out. And then we actually did just a closed door respray in our shed at home. Just masked the whole car up, and it wasn't the best job in the world, but it definitely made it look a lot nicer than it was before. Like some of the original white paint was starting to sort of fade out and go a bit yellowy and that sort of thing on the plastics down around the rear doors. So once all that second battery in the fridge and that was in, we're actually planning our first bigger trip, you know, more than 1 or 2 nights here and there. And that was going to be to Fraser Island. But we started having this rear bar made up by Patrol Customs up near Brisbane a few weeks before it, and just so we could carry the jerry cans and the spare tyre and that sort of thing. We ended up actually driving up, I think we left home at something like 2 AM in the morning. We were leaving for Fraser, stopped in there and had the finishing welds and stuff done on it and fitted up at 5 o'clock in the morning before we kept heading up to Fraser. So yeah, that was our first big trip. We really enjoyed it up there. Went 10 days without drama. We definitely sort of learnt a fair bit, things that we wanted to change. We wanted to, you know, get better battery life. We didn't have a solar panel at that time, so we were relying purely on charge from the car and driving, and it made it the 10 days, but it was pretty low by the end, and yeah, really sort of showed us a few things that we needed to change. So after that trip, we ended up just sort of going back into different things we wanted to change. Like we got the GU diffs with the different ratios in them. We upgraded the suspension to better springs suited to the weight of the car, as well as King shocks, which transformed the way the car drove. You can probably see on some of the photos we've put up from Fraser Island that the car was sagging a fair bit, especially in the rear, but driving it over there, it was like a boat. It was just all over the place, and the King shocks definitely helped fix that up a lot. Around that time was when I sort of started seeing a mate of mine, Brendan, a fair bit more. I wanted to have a bull bar made up because the old custom bar on the front of the car couldn't house a winch, and we wanted to get a winch on just because we do a lot of trips on our own and wanted to be able to self-recover. So that was, yeah, just the start of sort of where it all just started snowballing, really, because he did the bull bar. That was exactly the way I wanted it, and from there he fixed up this rear bar. It had a few issues which he fixed up straight away. He made us the stainless water tank in behind the back seats, which fit perfectly. He also, after that, helped with fitting the new, we got a bigger intercooler put on because I was planning on raising the performance again from what we had made with 200 horsepower at the wheels. So he helped fit the new intercooler, he made all the intake piping, made the actual custom made intake manifold. It's just done a lot on the car for me. We did sort of put a fair bit of effort into setting the car up to make more power but stay cooler after overheating the last engine. It became a pretty big priority, especially because like I said before, we're adding all this weight to the car. We want it to run all day, every day, run cool and make good power, and it's doing that now, which we're really happy with. We haven't had it like dyno tuned with all that other stuff, but it definitely has increased the power a lot. I will get around to having it on a dyno one day. And it changes the way it drives, especially with those 4:6 ratio gears, because it brings it back to standard gearing when you're talking about on 35-inch tyres, which keeps it in a good rev range. Another big benefit that most people don't realise is when you put those in to those size tyres, it actually brings your speedo back to the right reading, And because we had the car engineered on the bigger tyres, that's part of engineering. Like your speedo has to be correct without getting a speedo corrector kit, that is. So that gearing's all correct for the car. Basically from there, we've really just sort of continued to modify a few things here and there. We've done more trips since the Fraser one. We did about a week at Moreton Island. We've done a few sort of small road trips. We've recently just done the big road trip down to Jindabyne to the snow. That was a 3-week trip. We did, I think, a bit over 4,000 kilometres, and the car went really well. That was just after we changed to this all new draw setup and battery setup, which we've done videos on. And just along the way, we've sort of learnt a lot and sort of changed the setup to suit more. Like we changed the rooftop tent for a few reasons, just to get a bit better quality. Also the Dacia rooftop tent we use is a lot lower, so it brings your profile down, and we mounted it lower on these roof racks to get it down low. We changed from one of those hard folding solar panels, which wasn't rated very good at all, to a good fold out solar blanket, which works 10 times better. We've changed to, now we've got 2 auxiliary batteries in the back. We changed to a flat slide rather than the drop slide, side-by-side drawers, 2 EMU wings now. We've also got an Oz tent, jet tent set up for when we don't want to use the roof rack. Roof tent, sorry. We changed from a square awning to a fox wing. We turned the roof tent around to suit the fox wing. So we used to have it coming out over the back to form sort of a little cover. Then when we got the fox wing wrap around, it now covers this, so we have it out that side, which gives us even more cover again. We've changed lighting, both for driving at night and camping. We're just sort of constantly finding better ways that suit us and things that work better. We've still got a fairly big list of things that we want to do to the car. We are hoping to one day be able to do, like, travel the country and see it all. The next thing that we're doing, that we mentioned in another video, is we're going to strip out all the interior, lay sound deadener all down, new carpet, and we're going to upgrade the front seats. That's what's next on the list, and then after that we'll just keep moving through it, and we'll be doing videos on stuff that we change and sort of find better ways of setting up the car or anything like that. So keep an eye out if you're interested to see what we change on the car. Long video, but that gives you sort of a basic rundown on sort of where we are at with the car, where we've been, and sort of what we're aiming to do with it. So yeah, thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.